friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new Fairway Readers and Simple Room Reading Nook add-on from Sweet November Stamps. So I have masked and stamped the images that I will be using into a scene on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Memento Tuxedo Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Cocoa Vanilla Happy Days 6x8 pack. So I'm just going to flip through until I find a sheet that I want to use as my color inspiration, and I will tuck that under my cardstock panel. I'm coloring with my Copic markers, and I'm going to start with the fairy on the left. I'm going to work on her skin, and for that I'm going to use E000, E00, E11, and E13. I'll start with that E13 and lay in some shadows under her hairline and on the underside of her arms and the back of her leg. And then I'm going to switch to E11 for the part of her leg that is behind her wing to help that wing look a little bit more transparent. And then I'll take that E11 and start to blend out all of the shadows. I'll switch to that E00 to use as the mid-tone behind the wing, and then finish the rest of her arms and face with that shade as my highlight. And then I'll use that E000 for the rest of her leg behind that wing. So the part of her skin that is behind her wing is going to be just a little bit paler than the rest of her. And then I'm going to switch to the other fairy, and for her I'm going to start with the E11 and add that under her hairline and on the undersides of her arms. I'll blend out the E11 with the E00 and use that E00 to color in the shadows on her leg. And then I'll finish off her highlighted areas with the E000. I'm going to give these girls some rosy cheeks using RV10, RV11, and RV13. My RV13 likes to leak on me, that's why I pulled off both caps. And I decided to go with a cooler toned blush just to match the pinks that were in that pattern paper because they are a little bit more cool toned. So I started with the RV13, blended out with the RV11, and then finished with a little RV10 around the edges to soften that into their skin. And now I'm going to start working on the first fairy's hair. And I'm going to use E23, E25, E18, and E59. So I'm starting with my lightest shade for the hair. I'm using that E23 to kind of map out where I eventually want my darkest shadows to go. And then I'll start to build up that color and increase that depth, just adding some nice little streaks in there to give the hair a little bit of movement and some definition. So I added in the E25, and now I'm working up into the E18. And then I'm going to go in with my darkest shade, which is going to be the E59, which is going to add a lot of depth to that. Once I have the E59 laid in, I'm going to work my way back down in the reverse, going with the E18 and just pulling those streaks out a little bit farther, eating up more of that white space. And then I'll use the E25 and just continue filling in. And then I'm going to finish up with that E23, and that is going to go anywhere where I feel like the light would be hitting it the most. So the front of her bangs and the top crown of her head right behind her bangs and the top of her ponytail. The second fairy I also wanted to be a brunette because I actually colored them to look like myself and my childhood best friend growing up. And we both had brown hair. Hers was a little bit darker than mine. So I'm going to switch up the shades now to use E35, E37, E39, and E59 for this one, which is supposed to be me. I am once again starting with my lightest shade and mapping out where my darkest shadows are going to go. I just prefer to do that for hair and also sometimes backgrounds, just so that I don't get too heavy-handed right off the bat, and I make sure to leave plenty of room for the highlights. And I can still always darken things up if I want to by just adding extra of those darker colors once I see how it's looking. So I started with the E35, added in a bit of the E37, then went even darker with the E39, and then my final shade was the E59. And now I'm working my way back down in the reverse, just eating up more of that white space by adding in extra streaks and just elongating them in certain areas, and still making sure to leave plenty of space in between that is white that I will fill in with those lightest shades so that we get a lot of nice texture to that hair. So once I have everything filled in, I usually will go back in with that darkest shade and just add a few little extra flicks of color in those darkest shadowed areas since everything got kind of blended out, and just increase that depth in those little areas so that we have those nice low lights, which are going to make the rest of the hair pop. Normally when I'm coloring a full one layer scene like this, I prefer to start with the background first. I just find it easier to color in when nothing else is filled in. That way you don't potentially drag any colors into these wider swaths. Also, it just helps kind of block out parts of the card so you can really see what is left, and I just find it less intimidating to tackle the rest of the scene once those background areas are kind of blocked in. But for this particular scene, I could not decide what color I wanted to do the wall or the floor. It took me forever to decide. So I just started with the fairies, but eventually I decided to go with a pale golden yellow for the walls, and I used Y00, Y000, and Y21 so we could have a nice bright sunny library. And then for the floor, I just wanted something that was really simple. We're going to have a lot of color on this scene with the books, and so I just wanted something that was kind of desaturated and shadowy, and I ended up deciding to go with E40, E41, and E42. So I am just blocking in that color. I want to stay inside the stitching detail of that rectangle, and so I'm just carefully filling in up to that point, but not going over it, and just laying in kind of an initial layer of color with that E40. And then I'll come in with that E41 and start to add in a little bit of shadow now that that paper is nice and saturated, and I can start to carefully pull that color out. Again, I do have to be a bit more careful not to pull out any of those darker browns from the fairy's hair into my background, but at least it is brown, so if I did, I could probably clean it up fairly easily. But yeah, normally I would definitely do the background first. Just in this one situation, I could not decide. I am going to add in an extra deep shadow underneath that large book using the E42, and then I'll pull those shadows out around these two little girls as well and blend back out in the reverse. And then I am going to also darken up that shadow under the book just a little bit more. I felt like I needed a bit more prominence under that since that is kind of anchoring the scene. So I added in the E44, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that and then blend that back out once again. I love using the E40s for shadows because they're just very desaturated and a little bit gray toned in there as well, and so they just work perfect for that. So I am also going to use these shades to fill in all of the gaps in the bookshelves between the books to kind of block out those areas so that I can add in the color to my books later on. So while I'm doing that, I did want to mention that if you're watching this video when it first goes live, it is part of a Sweet November YouTube hop for their brand new release. And there are going to be 6 different channels that you can hop along to. I will have all of the channels linked down below in the description bar. There is going to be so much incredible inspiration across these 6 channels, so you are definitely going to want to hop along, give each video a like, and leave a comment and subscribe so that you can be entered to win the giveaway. They are giving away the entire collection of this brand new release, and I will have all of that information in my blog post, which I will link down below as well in case you need to refer back to that. The hop is going to last from Sunday, February 16th through Wednesday, February 19th. So you have 4 days to join in the hop. And then on Thursday, February 20th, around 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the winner will be announced on the Sweet November Stamps video hop in the description bar. So if you're the lucky winner, you have a week to respond. And then if they don't hear back, a new winner will be chosen. So definitely go back and check that to make sure that you don't miss out. So back to the coloring, I am just finishing up with my final shade, which is going to be the E41. And then I did do a second layer off screen just to save some time in the video to smooth out that blend a bit. Then I'm going to take E57 and I'm going to fill in the bookshelf. I'm only going to use the one shade for that because the shelves are such a small little area. It would be pretty hard to do any blending on there. And I really don't feel like the bookshelf itself really needs to stand out. It's the books that are going to be the star of the show on that bookcase. So I am just using the very tip of my marker, holding it nearly straight up and down, and holding it also very close to that nib so that I get a lot of control and can get that super fine line to just fill in that bookshelf. And then I'm going to move on to E50 for the pages of my book, and I'm just going to flick in a little bit of that color. That marker is super juicy because I just refilled it. I'm going to use the colorless blender to smooth out the edges and just leave the middle white. And then I'm going to use W00 to add a little bit of color to the baseboard, which I just drew in with a black Memento Tuxedo Black marker. By the way, if you're interested in me doing a masking video to show how I lay out a scene like this in one layer, definitely let me know and I can do that for you guys. I'm switching now to a red combo, pulling out some of the shades of that pattern paper, and I'm going to use R35, R37, and R39. For the big book on the floor, I actually only used the darkest 2 shades because there was only a sliver of that cover showing. But as I start to color in some of the books on the bookshelf, I will definitely use all 3 shades. And for those, I will put my darkest down at the bottom, that R39, and then I will blend out with the R37 and then use the R35 for the lightest. And I'm making sure to pick books that are kind of staggered from each other so that we don't have a red book on one shelf and then right above that we have another red. I want to just kind of space out that color a little bit. We have a lot of colors in that pattern paper to use, and so I want to make sure that the color is just spread around across that bookshelf. A lot of those books also have some fun little details, some little lines or oval shapes on them. I'm going to leave those for later. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next shade of books, and that is going to be R12, R14, and R17. And again, I'm just pulling that from that pattern paper. I purposely went with a pattern paper that had a lot of different colors in it so that I could really take advantage of that for this bookshelf and just add a lot of brightness and fun to it. I absolutely adore my bookshelves. I'm a huge reader. I have 6 different bookshelves in my house. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 7 bookshelves in my house. See, I don't even know how many I have. I adore books and they are so important to me and always have been since I was very, very young. The library has always been my happy place. I just feel so safe and comfortable there. And I also just love bookstores. I could hang out in a bookstore all day, every day if somebody would let me. It's like a dream of mine maybe someday to even own my own bookstore. And I love to travel to different bookstores. Whenever I go on different adventures, I always try to visit the local bookstore. It just makes me so happy. So I moved on to YR12, YR14, and YR18, and I did color two books that were on top of each other the same because they reminded me of Penguin Classics. And sometimes book lovers do collect certain editions of books that have the same kind of spine. So I think it's totally fine to color in two books similar side by side, especially if they are drawn the same. I'm going to add in some aqua tones using BG10, BG11, and BG13, and just kind of break up some of the warmer tones that we've got going on in that bookshelf so far. I really love those warm vibes, but it's nice to have a little bit of contrast with some cooler shades mixed in. And then I'm actually going to darken up that combo. I'll keep the BG13 and add in BG15 and BG18. Again, just pulling that directly from that pattern paper, and add in a few of those darker shaded books. And I really love how that color palette is beginning to pull together on that bookshelf. It just makes me so happy. I was so excited when I first saw these stamp sets because the Fairwees are my favorite of all the Sweet November stamps. I just love them. And then to have reading Fairwees on top of that, I mean, what could be better? And then having that background set with that gorgeous bookshelf and all of the other furniture as well that I didn't even get to use yet. I can't wait to use those as well because I just think there's going to be some beautiful scenes that I can create. Really nice and cozy scenes. So I'm moving on now to my darkest in that color palette. I wanted to include the navy blue that was in some of those flowers. And so I pulled in B95, B97, and B99. And I'm going to do a bunch more of these books. I will still add one more shade, so it doesn't have to be all of them left, but I am definitely getting down toward the end. So just filling those in. And once again, I did do two books that were side by side in the same navy color because they were drawn so similarly that they looked like they might be a collection. So I am going to do one more book in this navy combo. And I decided to do the one on the second shelf down on the far left. And then I'm going to switch to some brown shades to finish off the rest of those books. I wanted to use browns that didn't look like any of the browns that I had already used. So I went with E31, E33, and E35. It's kind of like a camel color. And I'll put the E35 down at the bottom and then blend up with the E33, and then I'll fill in with the E31. And I have started to fill in some of the little details with those brown shades on, especially the navy books. I just felt like the navy and the brown kind of went well together. And then I forgot to fill in that one book on the second from the bottom row, so I will go back and just finish that one off. And then for the rest of those little details, I'm going to bring in YR24, which has a little bit of a golden tone to it. So it's just going to be like some little gold accents on these books. So I'll just fill all the rest of those in quickly. And that is going to finish off the bookshelf, which makes me a little bit sad if I'm honest. But actually when I masked out and stamped this scene, I did two of them because I knew that when I finished that bookshelf, I was going to want to definitely color it again. So at least I have a second panel that I can color another day. For the plant pot, I kept the YR24 and added in YR20 and YR21. And then for the actual plant itself, I'm going to match the green to the leaves in that pattern paper, which are really more of a dusty blue-green. And so I'm using BG72, BG75, and BG78. I put the BG78 down at the base of each stem and where the line is drawn, and then blend it out with the BG75. And then I'm going to fill in the edges of each leaf with the BG72. So that stands out from the bookshelf because we don't have any books that match it exactly. It just sets it apart a little bit. And then all that's left is the fairy's dresses. So for the fairy on the left, I'm going to go with like a dusty pink, again pulling from that pattern paper. I'm going to use R81, R83, and R85. And again, I'll color the part of her dress that is behind her wing to be a little bit lighter so that wing looks transparent. And I will give her a shoe to match, and I will do the same thing for that. For the other fairy, I decided to give her a blue dress, and I'm going to use B91, B93, and B95. So it matches with the navy books, but it is a little bit lighter, just kind of ties the scene together. And again, I'm going to shade the part of her shoe that is behind her wing just a little bit lighter, and the same with the little sliver of her dress. And then to give those wings just a hint of color, I added a touch of BG70. And that is going to finish off this scene. So I will lift that up so you can see it in a little bit more detail. I'm going to pop this panel into my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment. I'm going to do that in the top left corner, and I'm using the sentiment that comes with the Fair We Readers, which says, "So many books, so little time," which ain't that the truth. And I am going to stamp that down in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm going to stamp that down twice to make sure I have a really nice, bold impression. And then I will set that aside to dry. That is a pigment ink, so it does take a little bit of time to dry. And then I'll pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using Lawn Fawn Ballet Slippers cardstock, and I'm going to stamp on the inside in Lawn Fawn bubblegum ink. And I'm going to use the sentiment from Simple Room Reading Nook add-on, which says, "The world belongs to those who read." And I'm also going to stamp the large chair off to the right side just to give a little extra something to the inside and make it look extra cozy. I am going to stamp that down a couple of times to make sure it's nice and bold. This ink does dry back a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure that it was clearly legible and like an even coverage of that ink. So I'm going to set that aside and go back to my pattern paper pad and choose a couple more prints to use with that inspiration print that we used for our coloring. So I really liked this pink polka dot. There was also a tiny heart that I thought maybe it would work. I liked this little sprig on the navy background. And I also liked the aqua plaid. Honestly, there were so many different prints that could have worked with that inspiration print that I had pulled out originally, but I decided to go with these four. So I'm going to trim those down with my paper trimmer. Then I'll start adhering those to the card using my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue. I'm going to start with this floral print. And I wasn't sure which way I wanted it to go because I knew that some of it was going to get covered up, but I'm just lining that up with the corners and making sure it's on there straight. This is an A2 standard size card, so it's 4¼ inches wide by 5½ inches tall. I'm going to take the pink polka dot and run that down at the bottom. I just put that a little bit up so we could still see a sliver of that floral print underneath. Then I'll take the navy blue with the floral sprig and run that down the left side of the card. And then I'll use that aqua plaid as a mat for the focal panels. So I'm just going to line that up on there and make sure that I have an even amount showing on all four sides. And then I'll add some foam tape to the back of that and pop that up on my card front. As a final embellishment, I'm going to bring in just a touch of Stardust Stickles. I'm only going to add that to the fairy's wings, just in the area where I added that BG70 to lighten it up a bit and give those wings a little bit of sparkle. And then I will pick up that card so you can see it a little bit better and give you another peek at the inside. I had so much fun coloring this one, so I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. If you liked it, please be sure to hit that thumbs up and leave me a comment. I love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. Don't forget to check out all the information about the hop down below in the description bar, and also find the links to all of the products I used today in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.